What if there was a tell, a way to reveal a murderer's deepest, darkest secret, where they hid the body? Time is not on a victim's side when they go missing, and definitely not in criminal cases where the body has not been found. And a trial coming up, like in the case of Suzanne Morphew case, where her husband is on trial for her murder, but the body has yet to be found. Or in cases where the body has been found, but much, much later, like in the case of the Justin Evans case. He was found 5 months outdoors after his disappearance. And important forensic evidence is also lost over time and often not recovered, leading to more questions than answers. And if we look at the Justin Evans case, a lot of important forensic evidence was lost just due to the fact that Justin was out in the elements for so long. And when these victims are missing, their families remain in limbo. And it's like I always say, limbo is hell for these families, not knowing what happened, where their loved ones are, and not being able to lay them to rest. However, there's new ideas, new studies, and new techniques that may help find missing people, like Suzanne Morphew, who's been missing for 2 years, but presumed dead. And it could even find people like Justin Evans sooner, who was found deceased in a swamp only at 1,000 feet away from where he lived. And as I mentioned, 5 months after his disappearance. Before I get into it, I'm Linda with It's a Crime. I upload videos weekly and love to dive into the details in these cases, connect the dots, and I also dabble in some decoding some codes, interviews, and statements. If that's something that interests you, you can hit that subscribe button. You can show your support by clicking that like button, sharing it out, and also chatting in the comments below. So now, let's get into it. When authorities search for a missing person, they can utilize a bunch of different resources like cadaver dogs, drones, search teams, underwater equipment, those kinds of things. And it can quickly get really overwhelming. Look at the Gabby Petito case, where it's like a needle in a haystack searching outdoors or in the forest or in these national parks. But what if these authorities can use drones and scan a forest to hone in on specific areas based on the change in the foliage in the forest, and it leads them to a body? Since 1980, the University of Tennessee's Forensic Anthropology Center has studied the decomposition of human bodies, also known as the body farm. One of the focuses they are working on is the study of microbiomes inside of us. And according to the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, it says the microbiome is the collection of all microbes, such as bacteria, fungi, viruses, and their genes that naturally live on our bodies and inside us. Although microbes are so small that they require a microscope to see them, they contribute in big ways to human health and wellness. They protect us against pathogens, help our immune system develop, and enable us to digest food to produce energy. The Body Farm has been studying how these microbiomes in us go haywire after death, which is what it then becomes necrobiomes. And they had a thought: what if the burst of nutrients that releases from our body actually changes the properties of a tree's leaves? And if that's the case, what if law enforcement can scan that rugged forest using a drone as a tool to look for the changes in the leaves in order to find deceased missing people? A plant biologist named Neil Stewart from UT Knoxville said, "What we're proposing is to use plants as indicators of human decomposition to hopefully be able to use the individual trees within the forest to help pinpoint where someone has died to help in body recovery." Now, when you die, this microbial activity leads to bloating, and eventually it's said that the body will puncture. And from there, the body actually releases a rank fluid of nutrients, especially nitrogen, where plants will then absorb it. And nitrogen is very important to plants. It's really important for plant growth, plant food processing, and creating chlorophyll, which actually gives the leaves their color. And it's essential for photosynthesis. Without enough nitrogen, the plants can't grow taller or produce enough food, and too much nitrogen actually causes issues as well. So let's get back to the forest. So when a human decomposes in the forest, it creates something called cadaver decomposition islands, and it changes the surrounding soil, the roots, and the leaves. And these changes can be detected remotely. So it transforms the soil in a number of ways. Neil Stewart said, "The most obvious result of the islands would be a release of nitrogen into the soil, especially in the summertime when decomposition is happening so fast. Depending on how quickly the plants respond to the influx of nitrogen, it may cause changes in leaf color and reflectance." So as it decomposes, the body sends the nutrients or the nitrogen into the soil, and possibly too much of it. For some plants like grass, it says that they would initially die back around the cadaver. And in the long term, it says this nutrient will help the plants grow, so the later vegetation does bounce back. But how the plants might bounce back is what they're looking at. Whether these plants are different because of this influx of nitrogen or nutrients, it's not entirely clear as of yet. This is why they're doing the study, but they've been studying this for the last couple of years. Neil Stewart said, "Right now for the Body Farm study, we're basically just taking the trees and shrubs that are growing naturally within our plots, then placing donors, as they call them, and then looking at leaf responses and plant responses at various distances." So what does this mean in criminal cases? Well, if we take the example of the Suzanne Morphew case, Barry Morphew actually bought 3 trees in and around that time of Suzanne's disappearance. There were invoices for them. And this would be naturally interesting to authorities and investigators, right? Now, if we look at Barry, Barry's used to burying things. He's a landscaper, he has his bobcat, he uses his bobcat, he changed out the bobcat blade the day of Suzanne's alleged murder. Before he moved to Salida, he actually buried furniture and a bunch of things in his yard and covered it up with alfalfa. And he also made a really strange comment to one of his workers, Morgan Gentile. He said that he would be able to bury a body and it would never be found. If Suzanne was under one of those trees, let's just say, my question would be, did the tree die? Did the leaves change? Did Barry have to swap it out, or did somebody see that this tree was different and didn't thrive like the other ones, or maybe it thrived more than all of them? How deep would she be? Now, there's some interesting information that is coming out now that they're starting to consider having human bodies being planted with a tree above them. I find that super interesting. If you'd like me to cover more of that, let me know in the comments below. But also, the interesting thing about burying somebody underneath the tree, besides, what we're talking about here, is that cadaver dogs can smell up to 15 feet. And we know Barry was very interested in true crime cases. He would listen to the forensic files, I believe it's called. He would listen to each case. So I'm curious if perhaps he knew that information. So it'd be 15 feet for the dogs. And funny enough, when I look up a bobcat and how deep that could go, it can go from anywhere from 10 to 48 feet deep, depending on the type of bobcat you have and the arm, etc. Now then, if we think if she is underground and if she is under a tree, her body would feed the roots, right? And you would have all these nutrients plus this nitrogen. There would be changes. And I wonder if there were. Let me know your thoughts about this. I find this fascinating. I find this interesting. There's a potential here. What do you think? Now, in Justin Evans' case, he was found in the swamp, like I mentioned, 1,000 feet away from his home, and detectives never found him there. And there's a little bit of controversy about how the actual authorities did not follow protocol. That's for another video. But they could potentially tell, if we base it on what they're finding at this body farm and this information from the study, they could potentially tell how long Justin was in that pond for, or that swamp, just based on the foliage around and what stage it was at. which would also tell them if he was moved, which is something that I have been believing for quite some time now, was that he was moved. And one of the other interesting tidbits I read was that they are also taking in consideration of a smoker and a variety of other factors they haven't detailed yet. I am waiting. There's a newer study that should be coming out, from just judging on what they were saying from the previous research that I've done, because it's been a while that they've been working on it. But they were talking about smokers and investigating that avenue to see if you're a smoker, how does that change the environment against a non-smoker. And so this could be fascinating, because maybe they could even tell the difference between someone who has cancer, like Suzanne had struggled with, or not, and see what the difference in that would be. So it's very intriguing to me. I do think about these trees, about Barry Morphew in particular, and Justin as well, but especially Barry. He's coming up in trial in just a couple of weeks here, and Suzanne's body hasn't been found. So what if she is still in the triangle or in and around the area, and what if the foliage did change and has changed, and it's just a matter of looking? Something to think about. Comment below, let me know what you think. If you'd like to see more of these videos, hit that subscribe, and you can also see my playlist on Barry here or my Justin case here. If you'd like anything code related, I will put that in the description box below. Please subscribe, like, and share. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you soon.